now we have Alan, and he promised to help us to discover our sales approach. So Alan, please, the stage is yours.
All right, thank you very much, and thank everybody for sticking around. So just a little background about myself. I also started off originally in advertising sales, just like Timo, and then I eventually moved into marketing and sales management in the financial services industry, primarily with banks. And so I had a tactic or a skill that allowed me to be able to go in and turn underperforming locations into top performing teams. And that was able to help move me from the Midwest of the U.S., where I was originally born, to the East Coast, and eventually to Manhattan, where I was working for J.P. Morgan. And I managed a team of 27. We had $1.2 billion in assets that we were managing, and we brought in roughly $36 million a year in annual sales. And then I got the lucky opportunity to be able to move with my family to Wiesbaden, just outside of Frankfurt, which gave me a nice little break and also probably put me in a situation that's similar to most of you solar entrepreneurs, where you can look back at what you used to do and realize, I don't want to do that anymore. And for me, it was the realization that I just didn't really want to go back and work in corporate America, especially in the high pressure areas of sales. But I knew I had these skills, and that I knew I could raise awareness of brands, and that I knew I could take sales teams and turn them into top performers. So I was trying to come up with an idea while I was there, and decide what was I going to do, what was going to be my next step. And for me, I was lucky enough, I was getting my MBA through a dual university program called EBS, and then another one in England called Durham University. And that allowed me to allowed me to get to experience and chat with a lot of different consultants from different firms. And I kind of realized that there was a piece that was missing, that the other consulting firms were really focusing on, and that was revenue generation. So instead of a company that was focusing on optimizing expenses, renegotiating contracts from suppliers, I took the angle that there was a need for us to go out and actually work to try to generate more funds versus cutting expenses. And so I created the company in 2017. I spent from 2017 until here at the beginning of 2021, also as a solopreneur, where I was doing the full road. So I was finding the leads, I was making contacts, I was doing the work. And so I understand from your side that there was a lot of stress in that. There's a lot of stress in it for me. And then now I have finally taken the move here in 2021, where I'm building out a team. So I'm hoping that what I'm going to present today will help you get a good understanding of kind of the process that I went through, and then some ideas to be able to help you actually get your sales plan together. So let me share my screen really quickly here. One second, please. There we go. Oh, sorry, I'm having a bit of issues here. All right, can you see my screen now? All right, so what we're going to go through now is we're going to discover and discuss about your sales approach. So there's a few things that are part of my goal for today. So by the time I go through the process, I want you to understand which sales approaches best fit you, which fits your industry, your product, and then I'm going to discuss a little bit about how to adjust your approach to match the buyer's personality. So when you talk about sales approaches in general, there's three guiding principles. So the first one is that all approaches start with the goal of building a relationship and helping people. The next thing I want you to think about is that when you're working with a sales approach, you don't want to just focus on mastering one approach. Instead, you want to know a couple different approaches. And that's primarily because you're going to need to adapt your methodology to the situation and to your buyer's personality. So there's a few things that there's three common sales approaches that I want to discuss as we're going through this here today. And while there are a ton of other approaches, things can pretty much balance down to some form of these three. And so those three are the relationship-based sales, the challenger, and then the champ selling system. So with relationship-based sales, this is really focused on building sales through relationships and then matching the buyer's need to your product's fit. It's best used when you're building relationships with long-term clients, or you have a long sales cycle, or they have a long buyer cycle. So there's 6 key steps that you'll go through when you're working with this sales approach. And so the first one is that you're going to want to find commonality, and you're going to get to know your buyer on a personal level, creating an environment of trust and openness. Then you're going to want to talk less than your buyer and really focus on uncovering their needs, finding out their point of view, their goals, and their challenges, and then getting an understanding of if your product is a good fit. Next, you want to connect how their needs and your solution are uniquely matched to solve their problem, and you want to also add how your product adds value to the situation. Then you're going to want to uncover and resolve the buyer's objections, and you're going to want to do this politely, and remembering that even though it might seem like a minor issue to you, it is a concern to your buyer. Then you want to focus on finding a win-win situation, and make sure that you're also still continuing to build trust and create that long-term relationship. And then finally, you want to remember is that after you have closed the sale, you still want to stay in contact with your buyer so that you can keep adding value. So the next one I want to talk about is the challenger. And this one's a little different. This one is about educating your buyer about a problem they either undervalue or they don't know they have, and then how your product solves that problem. So this might sound weird, but I'm going to guarantee that you've all kind of heard of this process because it was updated later on and it was renamed and it was called the elevator pitch. But for this presentation, I want to focus on the longer process, which is the challenger. So there's 6 key steps with this process also. And the first step is that you want to describe a problem to a buyer in a way that gains their agreement to the idea that a problem exists. Then after that, you want to deliver insights about the problem that your buyer has not previously considered, so they think about the issue in a new way. Then you want to explain the cost associated with the problem in a way that gains the buyer's understanding of why they should be concerned. And then you want to tell a story about how the problem negatively affected other companies in similar situations with them in a familiar and painful way. Then you want to explain the changes your buyer would have to adapt to solve the problem. And then finally, you're going to introduce your solution and explain how it helps your buyer adapt those behaviors better than any other approach. So I added the champ selling system because this was a system that was designed specifically for the mid-market and enterprise SaaS sales and sales management. So when you think about this process, it has 4 key steps. And the important thing to remember with this is it's a situation where you want to find and uncover 3 things, and then you want to set 1 impression when you're working with the buyer. So the first priority is, again, to understand the buyer's challenges, their situation, whether your product can help the buyer solve their issues. The next is authority. So you're going to want to find out who has the authority to make the buying decision, what is their process, and then if there's anybody along the way that might be able to deter against you actually winning this contract. Then the next is money. Now, this is the part that you want to set an impression. So this is all about focusing on how much should be invested to gain a specific return on investment instead of allocating an existing budget. So you want to really focus on creating a budget for implementing your product and then gain their support for moving funds from other priorities to yours. And then the last part with this is that you really want to focus on understanding how much of a priority is it to solve this issue and what is their timeline. So now I'm going to move into a bit more interactive. So this is going to be a time period when I'm going to ask you a group of questions. And this is by going down through this pyramid, we're actually going to be able to have you figure out which sales approach would be best for your product and for your services. And as you'll notice, the first four are all about choosing the approach. And then the last one is about adjusting your approach. So let's talk about the first one. So if you would just write down for me, and I'll give you a few seconds after I go through each one of these sections for you to be able to write some things down. So for the target audience, just write down what is your target audience. And then what is unique about the companies to who you are selling? How will you divide that industry into segments? And then how will you prioritize which segments you're going to go after? And as you're doing this, think about a couple things. First, think about, does your service or product solve a problem that the industry knows exists? And so they're just looking for someone that can understand their needs and solve that problem. Or does that target industry not realize that they have this problem? So you're going to need to educate them about the problem, and then you're going to have to tie how you can solve this problem. So I'll give you just a couple seconds here just to be able to write some things down. Okay, let's move on to talking about who's your buyer. So what I want you to do is describe their profile. What's their role? What's their title? What do they currently do without having your product? And then explain how your product makes your customer either grow revenue, improve margins, make their job easier, or how your product will affect their clients and their coworkers. And I'm asking you to think about those questions because those are things that are going to be important to the buyer. So you can kind of need to frame your pitch or your presentation to match those things. And then again, just like with the target industry, I want you to think about, does your buyer need to be educated about a problem that you can solve, or do they already know the problem exists and you just need to be able to match your abilities to solve their needs? So I'll give you a few more minutes here on this one. Okay, let's move on to what are they buying. So what problem are you solving? Then also think about, what are you selling, a product or an emotion? And I'll challenge you on this one a little bit. I'm going to tell you that in a lot of cases, you're selling an emotion, and I'll give you two examples. So the first one is, people don't buy a Rolex because they need something that tells time. They buy a Rolex because it gives them prestige and it makes people think that they're successful. Likewise, if you're selling a technology, you're not necessarily selling an app or a software system. You might want to be selling the ability for your client to feel like they're at the forefront of innovation, or maybe it's that they are being more innovative than their competition. So just think about a little bit about what's the easiest way with your product to be able to gain some emotion. And then I want you to describe what you're selling, and then think about it from the other side and describe what the buyers will be thinking they're buying. And then look and see if there's a difference between the two. And if there are, then most likely you want to switch to what the buyers think they're getting. And I'll give you a few seconds for that. Okay, so then the last is your personality. So you need to think about, are you an inquisitive person? Are you empathetic? Are you analytical? Are you something else, or are you a mixture of them all? Because most likely you're going to be a mixture of a couple different things with just one personality that stands out a little more. And along with that, I want you to think about, do you like educating people about something they don't know? So what a problem that they don't know exists? Or do you prefer to be able to sit down with people and have discussions about needs that they currently have, and then how you'll solve those needs? And I'll give you a few seconds for that one. Okay, so hopefully through those, you've been able to kind of guide yourself towards possibly what approach might work best. I'm guaranteeing I completely understand that at this point you're not going to know exactly, but at least now you might be on a path to be able to get you to there. So then let's talk about how the personality of your buyer is going to make you want to adjust your approach. So I've put 4 personalities on here. I know that not everyone is going to fit into each individual profile. That's not kind of how we work as humans. There are going to be a mix of these, but we might have one that's more dominant. And so I just kind of want to go through explaining defining those, and then after this, I'm going to give you a couple examples of how you might adjust your approach, or maybe which approach might work best with these buyers. So the first one is the assertive. So they're very goal-oriented, straight to the point, and competitive. They care more about the results of their relationship. They care more about their results than their relationship. So this might be a group where, just off the cuff, that maybe the champion program might work well with them. Maybe it also might be the relationship-based sales approach. The next group is amiable. And so they value relationships, and they need to trust their business partners. They also get excited about learning new things. So again, this one might be the relationship-based sales, but then again, it also might be a challenger because they like learning about new things. The next is expressive, and they're purposefully use their emotions when making decisions. And they're very concerned about others' well-being and how their decision affects the people around them. So this would definitely lead me to be more towards someone that would be interested in a relationship-based sales approach. And then finally, we have the analytic. So they love data, they love facts, and they love figures. And they will look right past the flowery pitch, and they want to get straight into the details. Okay, so let's dig a little bit deeper into the analytics. So once again, some of their common personality traits are they really are into data, facts, and figures. They're going to ask extremely detailed questions, and don't get tricked up because most of the time they're going to know the answer to those questions. They're going to be testing to see if you know the answer to those questions. And that's because they've already done deep research. They probably are going to have a longer buyer process, and that's because they want to be 99.99% sure in their decision. So here's some selling tips. So to start off, you don't want to try to educate them on something they didn't know existed. They come from a standpoint where they think that they have researched and they know everything that's going on. So that right there tells me that the challenger approach is probably not going to be something that would be good with them. So instead, you want to focus on uncovering their needs and matching them to your product. So that kind of leads towards the relationship-based sales approach. Next, you want to make sure that you don't make high-level claims or use flowery language, as they'll feel that you're being overly flattering and you're going to lose their confidence. And instead, you want to relate on reliable data and factually explain the key benefits using statistics, survey results, and percentages. Also, don't push them towards a deadline, as there's no shortcuts with analytical personalities. Instead, take your time, give them patience, and follow up, because that's really going to be appreciated. So next, let's talk a little bit about how to sell to the expressives. So some common personalities with the expressive is that they value personal relationships and loyalty. They expect mutual respect. They care deeply about others. They have very strong personalities, and they're highly confident and rely on intuition. So with this group, you really want to spend a lot of time building a connection and explaining how you're going to add value and how you hope for an ongoing relationship, which kind of dings towards, hey, this might be a relationship-based sales approach. But then they also are very open to new ideas that they have not considered, and especially discussions about how that might affect others in their organization. So that leans you towards challenger. So then you also want to look at that they focus on explaining how their decision will affect the organization and their coworkers on a human level. You also want to check in with them to make sure they're on the same page. So several times you might want to ask, so we agree that, or something along that line. And then you really want to focus on how you support them after the sale. And finally, don't spend a whole lot of time on facts and figures. They're going to be much more important to them to have a relationship and to build trust and to know that you're not going to do anything that's going to take away from that trust. So this one, there's a couple different styles in my work. So finally, as we've gone through this whole process, there's three things that I really want you to be able to take away. So number one is that I want to make sure that you understand that the common goal is to build relationships and help people. Number two is to be flexible and understand that you'll need to use multiple approaches. And number three, you need to adjust your approach to the buyer using an approach that matches the buyer's personality. And once again, I hope that you found value from the presentation. If you have not already connected with me through LinkedIn, here's my QR code. And if you will scan it, that will get you into me. And I look forward to talking with you in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan. I couldn't, write enough to take all the notes. What I also want to mention to the listeners, to the guys, that Alan is based in US, in New York, but actually he works internationally, so also in Europe. So keep that in mind if you want to get in touch with him. He's not that far away, and especially now when everything is digital. So
That's right. I've got a team of 3 already in Germany. So
yeah. Here we go. Keep that in mind. So while we wait for questions to upload, I have a question then. Which approach maybe is the most common you see, that is you see happening, most of the time, in your work? What kind of clients?
So for most people, unless you have something that's completely new to the market, if you're on the consulting side, it's going to be the relationship-based sales approach, because you're going to want to get in and discover what their issues are, especially if it's something where you provide multiple different services. So you can get in and you can say, let's talk about your issues. For us, it's talking about if your revenue is at the level that it needs to be, and then we start getting into at what point is the level, is the revenue dropping? Is it that you're not attracting enough people? Or you're not building an emotional connection with your clients? Is it that your sales team is fumbling with leads and not being able to stay in connection and build those relationships? But in most situations, it's that relationship-based sales approach.
Yeah, sounds really like that. We all people, so we want it to be not like just strictly business, but more like human interaction, and also taking from what the previous speaker said. It's you're helping, and
Yep.
you're helping in a relationship. What kind of scared me a little bit is client type, the analytical one. It seemed like if having that kind of client, there's not much fun.
Well, I'll say this: one of the things, especially if if you go in with a needs-based sales approach, and the one good thing about when you deal with an analytical person is when you come in and you sit down and you start having a conversation with them, they're very quickly going to tell you exactly what their problems are, because they already have discovered it. So that needs discovery, it's not hard to pull out of them where the problems are, or where they see that things need to improve. So that's one of the great things about working with them, is that they'll tell you straight in, these are my problems, can you solve them? And if you can solve them, great. If you can't solve them, it's a short conversation.
So yeah, if you remember, Thibault was talking about his second step is quantifying the problem, finding more what's hiding behind that. So I would imagine with an analytical type of customer, it probably could be quite difficult, because they would, if you start doing that, they would assume that you don't trust their judgment. Well,
you can still ask questions like when you're in the discovery process, the easiest question is always just tell me more. because you're not passing judgment on anything. You're just saying, I want to know more about that. So if they say that they're having products connecting with customers, then just say, well, tell me a little more about that. And then they'll just go into more detail. They might, especially if it's an analytic, they might be able to give you some facts and and statistics to be able to say, this is the point where we see it, and this is the number of people who fall off from our sales funnel, and in this spot. So it's all about much like how I talked about overcoming objections. It's about how you say things to be able to get people to open up versus necessarily what you're saying.
Yeah, makes sense, absolutely. And now we have a question.
Well, that's a good question. It all depends on how flexible you are. So if you're someone that is completely comfortable talking to all kinds of different personalities at the same time, then I would say go with that. If you're not super comfortable with that, then you can focus on one personality type and go that direction. But my caveat to this is eventually, hopefully, your business is going to grow. And as your business grows, you're really not going to be able to say, I only want to deal with one personality type at this point. So at some point in the process, you're going to have to get comfortable with dealing with, with presenting your approach to people of all different types of personalities. Just hopefully out of nature as it grows. That's just, you'll kind of get lead in that direction. Oh, that's a good one. How do you detect those type of people in advance? All right. So there's going to be multiple steps that are going to take place before you're actually sitting in front of them and you're going to be presenting with them. And that's where the sales approach comes into play. And so by that point, hopefully you will have had some email interactions. Maybe you've had a video chat to be able to start the process and say, hey, maybe it's, you're in that, hey, it might be a good idea for us to get together and be able to discuss whether I can help you or whether we can, grow mutually, whatever that lead is going to be. You're already going to have some of that going. So just make sure that in that first stage that you're just very open and just try to learning how they react to different things that you say and how you see how their personally comes across in that point. And then that prepares you so that then when you're either sitting in front of them or you're doing it virtually, and you're getting ready to go through discovering, because remember, they all start with building rapport. So as you're starting to build rapport, you'll know which direction you need to shoot off. I hope that answers.
Yeah, I think so. It's precise. It's not like we're jumping straight away in a deep end. It still starts somewhere, and from small signals or messages, we can kind of start getting more or less the idea, like what type it would be. And then, of course, later on, it could be adjusted one way or the other.
Exactly.
Yeah, yep. So I think, like you were saying also, like to be flexible with the approaches and to not just to put the client in one box and say, that's it, now you're going to be analytical for the rest of your life and you will never do anything else. That's great. Thank you very much, Alan, for all your insights. And also thank you to Bo and Michael. I think if now, like everyone who participated, who joined the session, if you are not better in sales, then I don't know what else can help you. Definitely so much input. Also, the good news is that this event will also be on the Factory YouTube channel, so you can always replay and like take it step by step and really like build yourself a nice kind of sales approach, tactics and strategies, like for your business. So one last question. So Alan, will you answer one last question quickly, and
sure.
Then we will
Sure. So let's see. So yes. So this is all I'm going to take this as mostly as you're talking about how you're going to actually present to your client. And so, yeah, you're going to have discovered that as you're going along through the process, what works best, and what's the best approach for that. And that's really when you want to get into when you're putting together your sales presentation, which says, here's your needs. This is why I say that my product solves your need the best. And you're going to want to adjust that. So the ones that are, if they're analytical, they may want to see more spreadsheets. When the ones that are more amiable, they're going to, maybe you present a history of things that you've done for past clients so that they build that trust and understand, okay, I'll go with you because I know these companies and, you know, you were able to help them. I hope that explains.
So in that case, I think now we are slowly everyone is getting ready. Well, at least in Berlin, I guess, for the evening. In other parts of the world, the day only starts, so you know, like it's not over. So yeah, as I said, I'm very grateful that you, Alan, and the rest, you were able to make it and to really share your knowledge. And I know sales is a very big topic, so maybe in the future we will continue. Yeah, let's leave it like this, to be continued, because the topic, it's not over. There's still so much to learn. So and yeah, like everyone, please don't be shy. Connect with Alan on LinkedIn. He shared his contacts, and be in touch and learn and more. So on that note, I would wish everyone in Europe a nice evening. And Alan, to you, a nice and still productive day. And yes, I think now, like, I definitely feel like I will approach sales in a different way, and it will be so much easier and more enjoyable. So thanks a lot.